All right. Hello. Come on. I only have one stream. Don't be silly. The cats are awake now. They immediately awoke once I decided to go streaming. So sorry, this isn't where it was. I was very confused because the name of the stream is wrong. Fix it. And I just closed the stream. I need to fix the stream title. This isn't the title of the stream. Oh my god, wait, Sugoi! Wait, someone named Envy is politically streaming, guys. I think if the end stream and watch them. Sorry, that's actually my favorite YouTuber. I mean, it's like, so, YouTube, what's up? Live. Details. I changed the fucking thing, because this isn't that. The organization of the construction is in. I guess I intended to read further, but then I didn't. And so it's sad. And so it's very sad. Okay. Let us continue. Before that, I'm probably not gonna use it much. But I'll turn on my drawing tablet. I'm gonna have a chance to use it because I've been like working and I've been too tired. Yeah. Let us conclude. The organization of the construction site. Let us conclude this overlong section with a brief recapitulation, similar to the plans that allowed the hedge of construction sites to distribute the work of the various trades in fulfilling an order. No building is more important than the one that is to house the collective, and yet none has benefited from so little attention. All the skills indispensable to its construction, its elegance, and its functionality have been called up in disorder and have never been made to work in concert. By glancing at box 4.1, we see that it is a work of art whose beauty matters to us more than anything, that we are indeed talking about an immense, messy, and muddy construction site. We'll take a look at box 4.4 in a second, after we read. There is no doubt about it. We have indeed extricated ourselves from the former logic of spheres of activity. Each of the trades or callings share in the same 6 functions in the same 2 houses. They cannot be distinguished in terms of the domain of reality to which they formally claim to apply. And then we are on 177, I think. Sorry, 277. And it's on 51. In chapter 5, we shall find another professional role, that of administrator, but its usefulness cannot appear before we define the power to follow up, that is, charged with describing the learning curve of the collective. We are probably, I think we're on 160. Yep, almost 61. There is no doubt either that we can no longer go back to modernism's old bipartite division. No entity is now asked to declare before its propositions are taken seriously, whether it's natural or artificial, attached or detached, objective or subjective, rational or irrational. We also see to what extent each of these skills profits from the presence of its neighbors, how much the sciences improve owing to contact with politicians, to what extent economists lose their defects if they allow moralists to add their concerns to their own efforts at modelizations. How politicians seemed weightier if their compromises and deals are added to the arrangements and manipulations of the scientists. Those who claimed to be building their republics by adding together the defects of all these trade persons instead of joining together their virtues were very poor architects indeed. Well, let us do it. Let us go through 4.1 now. Box 4.1. Recapitulation of the contribution of each of the skills to the functions recognized in order for the collective to carry out the search for the common world according to due process. Task number 1, perplexity, requirement of external reality. Scientists, instruments allowing the detection of invisible entities. Politicians, sense of danger allowing the rapid return of excluded voices. Economists, rapid mobilization of the attachments between humans and non-humans, between goods and people. Moralists, scruples that make it necessary to go looking for invisible entities and appellants. Task number 2, consultation, requirement of relevance. Scientists, construction of a suitable test, reliable witnesses, ad hoc judges. Politicians, production of opinion holders, concerned parties, stakeholders. Economists, articulations of differences in processes of interesting. Moralists, defense of each concerned party's right to redefine the problem in its own terms. I'm pretty sure this gets back to one of the things that was said. It's very important. The politicians will always say, we want this, and it's the moralist job to say, yes, but what do they want? Kind of thing. Task number 3, hierarchy, requirement of relevance. Scientists, innovations allowing compromises, shifting the burden to other, less important entities. Politicians, transformations of spokesperson made to represent other aspects of their constituency. Economists, production of a common language allowing commensurability and calculation. Moralists, obligation to find one and not two hierarchies, and thus to resume at once the work of composition. Task 4, institution, requirement of closure. Scientists, attribution and distribution of causalities and responsibilities, with the consensus produced being irreversible. Politicians, production of an inside and an outside, through closure and designation of an enemy. Economists, obtaining a justifiable decision at the end of the calculation. Moralists, against the distinction between inside and outside, offer of a right of appeal to excluded parties. Task number 5, separation of powers. Scientists, protection of the autonomy of questioning against the obligation to be reasonable and realistic. Politicians, distinction between phases of deliberation and decisions on the division between liberties and necessities. Economics, total distance between attachments and the reduction to calculations. Moralists, resumption of the shuttle between the two houses to prevent them from separating. Task number 6, scenariization of the whole. Scientists, opportunity to imagine a simplified but coherent and total common world. Politicians, production of the one/all relation with continual motion and resumption of totality through multiplicity. Economists, definition of the inside and the outside, and modelization of the public for itself. Moralists, continual rejection of totalization and pluralism as equally unfounded, obligation of resumption. Task number 7, power to follow through. See chapter 5. That was fucking long. That was a fucking long table. Went on for 2 fucking pages. The table also shows that abandoning the old constitution does not deliver us up, helpless to a confusion that is as vague as it is agreeable. Nothing is better articulated than the notion at first glance, too unitary, too totalizing, too undifferentiated, of the collective. The proof, now I have to skip, is in we can abandon the modernist order without finding ourselves defenseless. On the contrary, there are abundant procedures for registering the countless conflicts having to do with the production of a common world. One final advantage: every single one of these competencies and callings already exist in the most banal, everyday reality. I have no utopia to propose, no critical denunciation to proffer, no revolution to hope for. The most ordinary common sense suffices for us to take hold, without a minute of apprenticeship, of all the tools that are right here at hand. Far from designing a world to come, I have only made up for lost time by putting words to alliances, congregations, synergies that already exist everywhere, that only the ancient prejudices kept us from seeing. This is the thing. I was talking to Sirius, and Sirius has an issue with some of the stuff Latour is saying, and I think it comes from, in part, this. A lot. Latour, through most of his books, isn't interested in doing something new. At least from the beginning of the book. He often offers like solutions, or something, but what he does often is simply redescribing something, putting it in different terms, and that is what this is. He is. It's not a. He's not telling us. Well, he is, but he isn't telling us what to do in the sense that he's telling us, oh, where to go from here. No, this is as he said in the beginning, people are already doing what he's talking about. He's just writing about it in a hopefully useful way. Um, like he doesn't think that he's like alone in what he's saying. That he's like the that he's some Latour doesn't think of himself as some great man who discovered something that will lead us to greatness. It's already been found by many people. Just Latour's trying to help others see, through uh, in his small way by creating a book like this. Um, is I guess how I'm gonna put it. I don't know if I'm satisfied with how I put that, but that's what I'm gonna put. If the fairies have been so generous, if the baskets are so full of presents, I shall be asked why I have needed dozens and dozens of pages to restore self-confidence to a collective that, showered with such favors, should not have been able to fail in its career. Let us not forget the fairy Caraboss. On the pile of gifts offered by her sisters, she put down a little casket marked Calculamus. But she did not specify who was supposed to calculate. It was thought that the best of all possible world was calculable, provided the labor of politics would be short-circuited. This was enough to spoil all the other virtues, given how much heroism would have been needed to resist the attractions of that facile approach. Now neither God nor men nor nature forms at the outset the sovereign capable of carrying out this calculation. The requisite we has to be produced out of whole cloth. No fairy has told us how. It is up to us to find out. I don't know what Caraboss is. Wicked Fairy. The Wicked Fairy is the antagonist of Sleeping Beauty. Here, in some adaptations, she's known as Caradoss. The most notable adaptation of the character is Maleficent. Wicked Fairy. Okay, that makes sense, I guess. I think I understand. Maybe. The work of the houses will probably go for a little bit longer. Then I'll probably stop. We'll probably go for like a section or two. The work of the houses. After all the frightful difficulties of this book, we have finally reached harvest time. Historians have often described the solemn entry of sovereigns into their fine cities in the old days. Following their example, let us go back over everything we have just traversed and imagine the solemn entry of the sovereign capable of composing progressively the best common world, or remaining faithful to Leibniz's proud injunction. Let us calculate. We can now deploy the institutions of the common world in a public configuration that has been conceived for them at last. Let us not deny ourselves the pleasure. For the first time, thanks to a somewhat reconceived political ecology, associations of humans and non-humans can finally enter into the collective in a civil way. No one requires them any longer to be split in two, the gates of the city separated into objects and subjects. No sphinx blocks the approaches to the city to demand that they answer a stupid riddle. Are you objective or subjective? For the first time, non-humans can enter into civil society without having to be converted into objects in order to come bombard the ramparts of the city, humiliate the powerful, drive off obscurantists. Oh my god, I was fucking messaged. And I freaking forgot. Okay. Okay, well, I shouldn't be messaging any further, so it's fine. That was just very upsetting. That was just so freaking very upsetting. For the first time, non-humans can enter into civil society without having to be converted into objects in order to come bombard the ramparts of the city, humiliate the powerful, drive off obscurantism, raise up the meek, silence the prattlers, or stop the tongues of the counselors. For the first time, no treason has surreptitiously opened up the postern to bring them into the city so they can reestablish the moribund democracy on the solid bases of reason. The first time of the first time, of course, for our fine western cities, for it seems that the others, which are called cultures, with slightly condescending respect, have never really lost the habit of politely greeting the outside that sustained them. The long parenthesis of modernism precisely prevented us from meeting the others under auspices other than the anthropology of cultures. We shall see in the next chapter, once again, once our own collective has become a bit more civilized, how to imagine other, less barbarous forms of encounters in such a way as to benefit at last from their contributions. Let us try for the time being to run through the various functions of the collective, while taking the multiplicity of callings that contribute to assuring these functions and fusing them into homogeneous tasks. In contrast to what we did in the preceding section, we have yet to ask the reader to use some imagination, for no common sense yet makes it possible to take these badly stitched together conglomerates to be self-evident native forms of life. I'm so sorry. I'm going to clear my throat because I don't know if you guys can tell my throat's getting fucked. Okay, I did it, and hopefully that doesn't have to happen again, because that's annoying. First, we have two houses. We have called the first one charged with taking into account the upper house, and the second charged with putting in order the lower house. The terms are not important, for they too will be renegotiated. They are here only to point out provisional sets of competencies to allow the diplomats to speak. We know perfectly well that we are not dealing with ordinary assemblies, with closed, concentrated spaces, but rather with flowing bases, as multiple as rivers, as dispersed as tributaries, as wild as the brooks on a map of France. Wait, that's a Brooks reference. Wait, I know that guy. That's a reference. We've nevertheless decided to preserve these outdated expressions borrowed from parliamentary democracy to the very end, because they play no role other than that of a white flag waved in the wind so that we can finally negotiate as parliamentarians do while connecting with the republic heritage of our ancestors. And 277. My throat is so messed up and I don't understand why. I've simply taken up the same position that they occupied in figure 3.1. I'm using in a contradictory sense the expressions upper house, normally used for senates, and lower house, normally used for House Representatives, specifically in order to recall the incongruous and provisional character of such labels. By playing on the legal and scientific terms, I could have called the former the House of Claims and the latter the House of Congress, the House of Causes. Sorry. 165. Where are we? 52. There we are. To follow the parade, let us keep in mind 3 outcomes of the previous chapter. First of all, the upper house never begins its welcome ceremonies as a society in conflict with nature, but as one of the powers of the collective attentive to the multitude that is crowding up against its gates. Next, this multitude is made up not of objects or subjects, things or people, but of more or less well-articulated propositions, some of which are entirely new, while others have been expelled more or less recently by the lower house during the previous cycle. Finally, these multitudes always present themselves as associations of humans and non-humans. A virus never appears without its virologists, a pulsar without its radio astronomers, a drug addict without his drugs, a lion without its messiah, a worker without her union, a proprietor without her property, a farmer without his landscape, an ecosystem without its ecologist, a fetishist without his fetishes, a saint without her apparitions, elected official without her voices. Each of these propositions is accompanied by instruments capable of transposing what it says, but also by its own speech impediment, uncertainties about the faithfulness of the representation. We might actually be able to get through 3 today. Another 2 more, so 3 more in total. If come on, can I please? No, I want to. Thank you for letting me zoom. I wanted to zoom so I could see really quickly. How long is this next chapter? Is this next section? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, we can probably go to this. We can probably go to the reception of the lower house. That'd be good. Also, I've been completely forgetting to highlight, and that's horrible of me. How the upper house react to the subtle pressure of its postulants. Careful, let no madman come ask them whether they exist for real or not, whether they're proposing rational facts or irrational beliefs, whether they belong to nature or to representation that humans make of it, whether they reside in history or outside in nature. Such questions would not only be impolite, they would also be indecent, and especially anti-democratic. If some thug from the epistemology police insists on spoiling the solemn entry with these misplaced questions, let the officials confine him to quarters until the ceremony is over. That's fun. That's really funny. The upper house is not going to require an initial and impossible conversion among the entrants. It's going to react quite differently. It will get moving into a state of general alert, situation of worry, will manifest scruples, attention, precaution, fear, a state of urgency. It'll be all ears. We are intentionally intermingling terms supplied by the various corporations that take part in setting up the cortege. The cortege? Never seen that word. Maybe I have.
Cortege.
Cortege. I don't think I've ever seen that. The state of alert has some very particular properties. The upper house is responsible for the articulation of the we, the collective, but unlike its partner, the lower house, it has to reopen the list that composes this famous we to answer the question, how many are there of us to be taken into account? An assembly that has a definitive answer to this question that says, for example, we humans, we native-born French citizens, we Falklanders, we geneticians, we whites, we the communion of saints, we earthworms, would not enter into a state of alert. He would thus welcome the appeal by the external multitudes in a very uncivil fashion. It would give the appearance of a solid fortress to be defended against all comers at any price, and not that of a fragile collective in the process of exploration. Such an assembly would only fulfill its task well on condition of being as sensitive as possible to the foreigners of what come to knock on the door of the collective. Now it cannot preserve this astonishing property, so different from that of the societies of the old regimes, composed of humans and social factors, except on the condition that the strictest separation of powers reign between it and the lower house. No one must impose on it the restriction implicit in the following question. Are these new beings compatible with the regulated existence of the collective? This question is to be decided by the other house alone. Here we find again the requirement of autonomy that the scientists rightly defend but wrongly use to appropriate for themselves, along with the political distinction, a highly welcome one, in the freedom to discuss, the necessity to decide. Finally, we had the ethical requirement that the question of belonging be raised continually and without preliminary conditions. All these obligations reinforce one another to allow the indispensable separation of powers to fulfill its function. How far we are from the impossible purification of facts and values which we left behind in the previous chapter. 277. 53. We are also far from the maintenance of the pluralism that accepts diversity of opinions only against a background of an indisputable common world made up of a badly composed mix of nature and human rights. The upper house would take the exploration of multiplicity much further than any respect for the pluralism of opinions, when the risk precisely of not taking them the mere opinions. This is interesting. Conversely, the lower house will seek unity much more assiduously than people try to do in regimes that claim to be pluralist. And then, I think we're on 167. Yeah. If the collective is well managed, if the upper house possesses a high degree of sensitivity, then a series of questionings begins, which we could group into two sets of inquiries. First set. You who are present and opening yourselves to the door of the collective, what are your propositions? To what trials must we submit ourselves to make ourselves capable of understanding you and getting you to speak? Task 1. Requirement of extreme reality. Second set. Who can best judge the quality of your propositions? Who can best represent the originality of your offer? By what reliable witnesses can you have yourself represented most faithfully? That's number 2, requirement of relevance, the consultation. We're going to highlight all of this, obviously. Because obviously that's important. Trivially. 277 again, 54. On this sort of extended peer review, see Revetz, 1983. I should fucking... I have so much to read, guys. It's so over for me. So freaking- and I have to work so much. And then I also have to work more because I do essays now. But it's so worth it. I act like it's like I act like I hate it, but I love it. And I love and I well, I don't like going to my actual job, but I like doing this. I like going to this, my fake job, because I don't get paid enough for it to be a real job. Let us recall that speech is not the property of humans alone, but that of heterogeneous assemblages whose quality is precisely in question before the upper house. Let us recall too that the notion of proposition does not yet make a distinction at this stage between wanting to be, having to be, and being. It is the responsibility first of the upper house and then of the lower house to introduce these differences gradually, differences that define no longer states of things, ontological qualities, the successive stages of procedure whose forms must be scrupulously respected. Essences are yet to come, the animate form of non-humans as well. Essences are to come. Okay. I'm gonna highlight this because I want this. It is not an easy task to transform the inarticulate mutterings of a multitude of entities that do not necessarily want to make themselves understood. Every researcher, every politician, every moralist, every manufacturer or marketer, every administrator knows this well. Also, sorry that I've kind of stopped a little bit explaining as much as I used to. I used to kind of stop quite a bit and explain what I thought things meant. Um because there comes a difficulty. Um in this chapter, new stuff for me has come up, and so I'm kind of not explaining because I kind of don't know how to yet. I don't know how to explain what I'm reading. So I'm just like, well, let's simply keep reading. Because I don't want to waste your time and I want to read as much as I can, obviously, so that I can make sense of it. So that I can um so that I can get rid of the speech impediment, as Latour would say. Or something. I think that's probably kind of right. That's probably kind of accurate way of using that. But somewhat. Um but yeah, that's what it so sorry about that, but that is the reason why. It's just a profusion of clever devices, setups, instruments, laboratories, questionnaires, visits, investigations, demonstrations, observations, and data collections will be required in order to make the propositions a little more clearly understood. Unlike the old Constitution, let us not forget all this work is not chalked up on the debit side of the quality of the diction, but to its credit. The more work one does in the laboratory, the more quickly and clearly matters of concern are detected. The more the opinion formers are equipped, the better articulated their opinions will be. The more one structures attempts to bind goods and persons, the better the quality of the investigation will be. The more one is determined to raise artificial problems, the more one cultivates the art of the scruple. The link between constructivism and realism would be perfectly obvious if the Sphinx had not imposed its blockage on the city for so long by asking propositions to choose between facticity and reality. And go back to 55. We go to 55. This is the key feature of the badly misunderstood notion of the so badly misunderstood notion of constructivism. See Latour, 2003. Um, is this what I think it is? Latour 2000. Wait a second. Wait a second. This essay. Wait a second. I think I know this essay. Wait a second. I've read this essay like fucking 5 times now. Wait a second. It has unleashed so many hesitations in the court in the cortege. There is some point in recalling this once again. Want the procession to advance in orderly fashion. It is by its capacity for work, by the number of items of equipment and sensors, by the artificiality of its shapings, by the interventionist nature of its setups, by the intentionality of its research, by the scope of its requirements, that a good assembly is measured. Thanks to such an assembly, we understand through the mediations of its translators what is being demanded by the candidates for existence that are thronging at its door. Thus, the propositions are now already almost involved in the collective. In any case, they're beginning to speak its language. I cause a deadly and unforeseen illness, says the virus and its virologist. I demand the means to modify cosmology profoundly, say the pulsar and its accompanying radio astronomers. I pay, and yet what I want is not taken into account, says the consumer in his means of calculation. I propose to modify cosmology even more profoundly, says that flying saucer in its UFOologist. I cast spells, says this fetish in its fetishes. An assembly that would accept all these propositions at once would explode right away under the tremendous multiplication of foreignness that crowd in to demand existence. Those who are frightened of the dangers of cultural relativism had never had such a nightmare. It's important, however, the upper house not decide too soon to eliminate. Let us not forget that it no longer disposes of the old razor that allowed it, without ever succeeding, to distinguish between statements of fact and judgments of value. No. It is not yet time to let the epistemology police, axe in hand, out of the quarters to which they were confined. The upper house must not set up either an executioner block or a gallows. It must simply smooth the way for the other house by proceeding to the second type of inquiry, which I have called consultation. Readers may have been bothered by this word. It has something of the flavor of a rubber stamp, knee-jerk approval, and yet this second task has the same originality, requires as much work as the production of perplexity. Who is to judge the quality of the propositions that crowd around the door of the collective? The modernist constitution was never able to settle that question. This is why it always stifled the democracy that it pretended to be arousing. By combining the tasks of the two assemblies, creating the sacred separation of powers, and substituting forth the aberrant distinction in facts and values between what is and what ought to be, the modernist constitution never had the courage to motivate its decisions to reject, as they say in legal language, and it settled for an arbitrary elimination by selecting the candidates according to their appearance alone, through these little words not subject to appeal: rational, irrational, primary qualities, secondary qualities. The candidate entities, except those which had good luck to fall into the hands of scientists in lab coats, never had the right within the narrow framework of modernism to avail themselves of a council composed according to the specific problems that they raised for the collective. Highlight. I don't really know. Right now, Latour is kind of just explaining his stuff, and like this is just stuff that he's kind of already went over, so it's really hard for me to but he's going over it in full. He's like he said to you all the functions, and now he's stating to you kind of like how this works now. An assembly will be all the better to the extent that it succeeds in detecting for each proposition that is a candidate for existence, the most competent jury to judge it that can satisfy the requirement of relevance. Appearances notwithstanding, no task is more difficult than this one for those who are accustomed to the facile ways of modernism. Matters of concern reveal precisely the total or partial incompetence of the juries that are usually convoked. If the word consultation has such a bad representation, precisely because people think it is easy to convene the concerned parties. Now, there is nothing more complicated than to discover and summon reliable witnesses, capable of finding exactly the right speech impedimenta. You want to spread genetically modified organisms in Swiss fields? Fine. Who is to pass judgment? The Swiss, probably. The users of illegal drugs attach so much importance to their drugs they prefer to die from them rather than do without them? Okay. Who is to pass judgment? Why not drug addicts? In any case, they cannot sit on the jury. The salmon are deserting the tributaries of the Aller and ignore their ladders set up on the dams. Who is to pass judgment? The salmon, of course. Or at least they have to participate in the jury. You want to save the elements in Kenya's parks by having them graze separately from cows. Excellent. But how are you going to get an opinion from the Maasai who have been cut off from cows, from the cows deprived of the elements through the brush for them, and also from the elephants deprived of the Maasai and the cows? And then 277. We're on. Fuck, what page are we on? I don't know what page we're on. Oh my god, I think we're on 170. On this remarkable example, see Western 1997, Thompson. Oh my god, stop referencing things I want to read. I hate you. Okay, it is 170. These are the sort of thorny questions proposed to the upper house, which is responsible for defining a plan of investigation for each entity, a path of trials that make it possible to evaluate the entity's claim. It will be objected that the upper house only recycles the human mode of consultation for use by non-humans, that it is hard to see why one would want to extend the formalism of social democracy to objects. The upper house does just the opposite, for it benefits henceforth from the advantages offered by the cooperation of the various professions. The social democrat can finally learn from scientists how to treat foreigners with respect. By a cruel paradox that says a lot about the weakness of modernism, and actually know how to consult non-humans better than humans. A natural scientist would never imagine that the plan for her investigations is fixed once and for all for any phenomenon whatsoever. This would be like imagining that a scientific method exists. That's true. Discover a possible approach, turn up a reliable witness, find the right way to falsify a hypothesis. Why, that is often enough right there to warrant a Nobel Prize. No one would dream of talking about elements without consulting the said elements by experimental procedures of unprecedented subtlety. With humans, though, we do not take so many precautions. The pretext that humans are endowed with speech, politicians like many survey specialists, sociologists, journalists, and statisticians imagine that one can speak of them in their place without ever truly consulting them. That is, without ever finding the risky experimental apparatus that would allow them to define their own problems themselves, instead of simply answering the question asked. Barry Figaro, in terms of the virtues that we require of objects, do you know many humans worthy of being non-human? I don't understand that, but it sounds very silly. I like it. Who's Figaro? A cunning Spanish barber character from the 18th century French place who is the protagonist in the famous operas and plays by Mozart in Rossini. Interesting. From this viewpoint, 57 by the way. From this viewpoint, the human scientists have everything to learn from the exact sciences. not because the latter would treat their candidates for existence as objects that can be mastered at will, but on the contrary, because they discover day after day in laboratories failures, the recalcitrance of objects. See the important arguments in Stenger's 96, Discrete 96. For commentary, see Latour 2000. Highlight all of these. Yay, more reading! One second. The importance of the separation of powers between the two assemblies is quite clear. If we continue to disturb this second type of inquiry by raising the question of the candidate's compatibility with the collective, we'll never succeed in discovering a relevant jury for each proposition. On the contrary, we want to speed things up by limiting from the jury those whose presence would risk validating the existence of beings that must not be part of the collective, according to the lower house, the preceding stage. This was the source, under the old Constitution, of the greatest indignation. If drug addicts make the decisions on drug policy, where are we headed? If people believe in flying saucers sit on the jury that has to decide about the presence of flying saucers among us, we open the door to all sorts of madness. The mass have to pass judgment along with element specialists on the experiment that makes elephants speak. How are indisputable data going to be produced? If human embryos have to give their opinion against elderly victims of Parkinson's disease, that's the end of scientific progress. These indignant reactions came across as the expression of morality itself, the framework of nonism, whereas they broke the essential condition posed by the ethics of discussion. No one, as Habermas says so eloquently, be brought to apply the results of a decision if he has not participated in that discussion that led to the decision. This is very interesting. Actually, very interested by this. Like all the great moral principles invented to defeat humans against objectification, this excellent principle applies to all, humans and non-humans. Moreover, its application is not contested if you are told that physicists have to sit on the jury that decides the lasting existence of pulsars. However, here too we have to ask whether the astrophysicists have to sit on the jury alone. Once again, the collaboration of skills makes it possible to establish the list of jury members in an appropriate way. How can we detect those whose lives will be profoundly modified by the arrival of pulsars? They may not all wear lab coats. Who are they? Where are they hiding? How can we recognize them? How can we summon them? How can we get them to speak? These are the questions that keep the upper house in a constant state of agitation, and that no form of incongruity, no sin against good sense and convention, must be allowed to disturb. This is how political ecology rediscovers the oldest democratic institution, puts it back in its place. In the audacious elaboration of an experimental metaphysics, the results by definition are not yet known, results that must be judged by those who have translated them into their own terms. The upper house has now completed its task. It has detected the candidates for existence, translated their propositions into its own language, found for each the jury that can answer for its quality in sponsoring it, the terms of our historical fiction. This amounts to saying that each group of foreigners makes its own entrance into the city beyond a more or less vast group of members of the collective, with whom they have established bonds of friendship, who have been designated as their judges, sponsors, constituents, or guarantors. Let no one object on this point that there is no real assembly capable of fulfilling these two functions of perplexity and consultation in a satisfactory way. We are no longer seeking satisfaction. It's not a matter of doing things well once and for all, but only of proceeding as best we can to one of the iterations of the collective. In this sense, all collectives are and always will be ill-formed. We shall see in the following chapter all the moral, scientific, political profit that can be drawn from the setting into motion the collective placed in apprenticeship by experimentation. All that matters to us for the moment is that the cortege can be large enough to head towards the seat of the second power, the power to put in order, exercised by the lower house. Oh my god, that was actually It was really good. I don't know how to say what I have to say about this. We have like 10 pages left. Oh wait, we actually don't only have like 10 pages. It's actually wrong about that, I'm pretty sure. Let's see. Okay, no we do. No we do. Okay, so I was right. I did remember right. The common dwelling, the oikos, is like really short. Okay, so tomorrow, and by tomorrow I mean next stream, which isn't going to be tomorrow because I work. I mean, I don't know when I don't work next because they fucking didn't put up my schedule. We will be going over. We'll be finishing chapter 4, and we'll be moving on to the kind of final chapter. There's the conclusion section, which, like, obviously, like, see, there's the conclusion. And so, we'll probably, we'll, we'll probably do the conclusion all in one sitting. We'll probably do the. I think that's how I'll do it. I'll do the conclusion all in one sitting. We'll read chapter 5, and then we'll spend an entire stream doing the conclusion. I think that's how it'll work. 171. But yeah, that is stream. You all enjoyed. Sorry that I keep these short. Just I I work 40. Sorry. So before I didn't get scheduled 40 hours a week, and so I basically only worked 3 or 4 days out of the week. And now I work 5 days out of the week, and I work for 8 hours, and I work at a very awkward time. I work from 2 to 10 usually, or 12 to 8, which makes it hard on me. And so basically, I get up in the morning and I work on reading stuff and doing stuff, and like that's kind of all I do. And then I go to work, and then at work, if I am not busy, um, I continue working on this stuff. And so it's why I keep things short, because after this, even though I'm gonna end stream, I'm not gonna stop working. I'm probably gonna finish something so that I can finish an essay, finish reading something so I can finish the essay I'm working on, or at least get further in the essay I'm working on. Not finish it really, but get further in it. So yeah. Sorry about all that. But sorry for keeping streams short. If I didn't have to work so much, if this was like more, if this was just more profitable for me, I would probably do it more. I'm gonna be honest. If I could, I would do this full time. I would do this 40 hours a week. This would be my full job. I would stream, um, like almost every day. Um, if people really wanted that, if like I got paid for that, if I got paid like roughly similarly to what I'm getting paid now for my actual job. So, so yeah. But, thank you all, everyone. Please have a good rest of your day, and see you next stream. Which, it'll probably, if they continue scheduling me the same way they have been, will either be Thursday or Friday. So it's probably going to be soon, and we probably have. I can tell you. Let's go to X. Let's see. So this will be one stream. To here will probably be one stream. To here will probably be one stream. To here will be one stream. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have about 5 streams left of this, which I like. I think that's good. I like that. I think that's good. But yeah, we're gonna be doing this. I'll schedule the streams in advance, but in about 2 weeks we'll probably do this, and we'll have spent. Oh fuck! How many hours will we have spent on this? Not a lot, like, but it's a decent chunk. Wait, let me look it up real quick. I'm kind of artificially inflating the time right now, but fuck you. We'll have spent 22 hours going over this, just about. If we say a stream is about an hour, which generally is how it has been, it's either been an hour or a little under or quite a bit over. Um, so, so yeah, we'll have spent like 22 hours on this. That's crazy. But anyway, thank you all and everyone. Please have a good day.